are a few people who do, but the people that don't outweigh the people who actually do. So there's all of that. Do I, like, the thing is, right, do I have a favourite episode? I don't really know about that one yet, because I've talked about everything. I've still got a few more things I want to talk about on the podcast. But I want to just mention, do I repeat myself? There are times when I've repeated myself on the show before, but definitely not always. Like, I know I had my, I had my whole spiel about movies. I like my films, which is probably why the review show exists in the first place, because I have a chance to talk about movies and stuff. So I've been talking about movies, right? And that's what I would do. I would just think of things to talk about. So, you know, talk about movies, and I recently mentioned the Guardians of the Galaxy 3 trailer on the new episode, and I talked about, you know, the Black Phone, The Shining again, and then there was also, like, the Martin Scorsese and Tarantino stuff. I did a whole movie episode, but I'm going to be real with you, right? That was supposed to be the movie episode, but I talked about specific genres, like superheroes and comedy and stuff like that. It wasn't just everything I know about movies. Then as the episodes went on, I mentioned how in my childhood I really liked Pinocchio. Then also there was Shrek and stuff like that. So there's not really one movie episode. It's kind of just all around. I mean, I talked about Black Adam as well. I've talked about movies a lot, but it doesn't mean I've talked about movies the whole entire time. No, because ladies and gentlemen, right, this is one thing I want to talk to you about, right? It's like, I have talked about very, very random things on this show. Like, over the course of this year, I talked about phone brands, right? That was one of the weirdest episodes, but it was to do with the technology saga that I did. Like, I talked about phone brands, like my thoughts on iPhone and Samsung. I went off on a whole entire rant about iPhones and how they're expensive. I said they're $1,000, but there are iPhones that go for $3,000, $4,000. There are some that go for more than that. But yeah, I was just saying, right, I've got that, and then I talked about the confessions about how I loved eating poo. There was all this weird stuff that I kind of talked about. There was the Biggest Fears episode, which is one that sticks out to mind, and you just notice that, you know, for the 10th episode, it was the Phoenix episode, and then Biggest Fears was the episode 20, and then episode 30 was the wrestling episode. I touched on that, right? That was an episode that I was meaning to make for a while, because I mentioned it on the show. I mentioned all these things, and yeah, but there was also seasons. We talked about seasons, right? That was one of the randomest episodes, right? And I mentioned episode 10, 20, 30. I can't remember what I did for episode 40. Let me just look at that right now. I might as well. I'm not trying to use my phone the whole time, but I can't remember everything I talk about. Okay. So for episode 40, I talked about the primary school. It was called Remembering the Good Old Primary Days. So I talked about primary school, right? I did a whole phase of primary school and high school. Then I did this episode where I did the fandom fatality, which I didn't really know. I don't know what I was doing with that. I just got really bored. And then we got to talk about Black Adam, obviously. Then the last James Rambling show for a while. So that's the thing I want to talk about, right? I actually haven't been the most consistent with this show. There was one time when I just didn't put an episode out for a couple of weeks because I didn't really know what to do with that episode. Then there was a time when I took an entire month off of the podcast so I could focus on my exams and go see Louis C.K. and go to the South Island. And I loved the Louis C.K. stuff. I loved Louis C.K. and I love the South Island. Exams are okay, you know, you were just going into a room writing stuff and that kind of thing there. And I want to go back to the technology saga. So this was the phone brands, you know, you had that, and then I had the oddness of my internet interactions. That was an interesting episode, definitely. And then you had the favourite YouTubers. So you basically learnt about what my favourite YouTubers were. Then you had Tudor on the show, which was a bit of a side topic from the other stuff, or a side topics, I should say. Then I got the podcast hosts. A podcast host talks about his favourite podcasts. And I'm going to say that I have taken things from different shows, like different podcasts. Because if you know, right, I mentioned Trash Taste, which I still watch to this day, but I go on so many tangents, and so do they. But that is because I have mentioned that I get so some of these things are from Discord, which I use, and I go off on a bunch of tangents on Discord. I do a lot of tangenting on Discord, so that's kind of why I kind of have done this thing of that. So, oh yeah, I talked about anime TV shows, right? There was that, right? Anime, I talked about that. I even talked about the Scottish government, which is was an interesting episode. Right, I filmed that, like, I want to say before I went to see the Nicolas Cage movie with my dad, and he walks in, but now that I've got the On Air with the James Allen show, it just notifies them that they're not going to walk in as I do this stuff anymore, because that was what a thing. If you remember back in the day of the show, right, I had this moment in one of the podcast episodes where I just was talking, right, and my mum walks in and is like, I'm filming a podcast, mum, and that kind of thing happens. Oh wait, I just forgot this as well, right? I talked about drinks, and I don't even remember that episode, to be honest, but I talked about drinks and stuff. And I did say I talked about my hot takes on food, but don't worry, I am going to think about trying to do an episode where I actually talk about food properly. So there's definitely that. Oh wait, I want to talk about the experiences I've had in other countries, which was an episode I talked about. Talked about Spain, going to Spain, you know, getting lost in Spain, which was a crazy, crazy thing. Who would have thought, you know, this kid, right, he's so oblivious, doesn't realise what's going on, walks into the women's bathroom, right, and then he gets locked in there, and yeah, it goes on for a bit and stuff like that. So there's that, right? Sports. I talked about sports now, you know, I talked about American football. I was like, you know, American football, you know, but I didn't really explain myself well. The thing is, right, I have nothing against American football. All it was that I can't understand why they call it American football when they're not really using their feet, because there's rugby